when I started this idea of having this panel, I wanted to talk only about AI. And then I asked my guests to, one by one, if they could intervene, and they all were working in finance and auditing. So I thought maybe we'll make it about finance, auditing, and AI, since it seems to be a common theme. Maybe finance and auditing, they're a bit ahead of the curve, and they are already using AI massively. So at this point, I invite my guests. So we have Philipp Kowalski, Digital Enablement Agent at Siemens. Then we have Martin Dieste, Chief Knime and founder of Finnovation Flows. And then Jamie Crossman-Smith, founder of Block AI. Maria Molanian couldn't come, so today we are only 4. Okay, so let's start directly with AI. You all have used the Knime AI extension. So can you tell us about some use cases where AI made the difference, or something where it saved the day? Shall we start with Martin?
Yeah, sure. I think especially in finance, one use case that can generate a quick return on investment is anything related to retrieval augmented generation. In finance, you typically have a lot of guidelines, some internal, some external, like accounting standards, which can be quite chunky documents. And just having a chatbot, pretty much, that draws off the information in a vector store can really accelerate getting the right information that people otherwise have to search for, maybe for half an hour.
And another one, a similar one, different one?
I think that's an excellent answer. I think, for me, it's been the standardization of data. If you've got a big data set and you've got things like names, addresses, whatever that might be within audit, what you want to be able to do is compare like with like, and that's difficult to do, but generative AI allows you to sort out all those data masks, etc., without having to write that code to be able to do that, and that saves you an awful lot of time.
Yeah, I can definitely confirm, and especially coming from a citizen developer background, I found Kai was extending that low-code theme even more that we already have for so many years in Knime. One very easy example would be, so I was always struggling with regex, so how can I extract certain parts out of a text chain, and with Kai it just became like a reduction from okay, try regex 101 for an hour to find the right formula, quote unquote, down to a few minutes basically, and was a great aha moment again.
So, but then you used the Kai mainly, or did you also use the AI extension inside the workflow to produce some use case based on some solution based on AI?
So I basically use Kai a bit. I guess the usage of LLM models comes with a certain, how can I say, political dimension also, because there are some things you can do in big enterprises and some that you can't. And like connecting, so what we are planning right now is to have the newest version also connected to our LLM, and looking a little bit ahead, eventually it has some company-specific knowledge in there, so we can marry these two worlds. That would be something great.
But that brings me to the next question. So what were the problems that you encountered when you tried to introduce AI in your workflows, in your solutions, within your company? So we have heard a bit from Philipp, if you want to elaborate maybe on that, or?
I think one of the main issues that companies have in adopting AI generally, and it's not just within Knime, it's the level of trust. Yeah. There's an amount of nervousness out there around, you've heard about things like hallucination, etc. Companies worry about that, they worry about the outcome. But the answer is quite simple. I say to my clients, for example, think of it like a very junior member of staff. And that junior member of staff, you would never get them to write a report, or you would never get them to do anything without checking it first. And as long as you position those right controls in place, you can really make the most of AI.
I think I can just second that obviously hallucinations are a problem. Obviously with what I mentioned before, retrieval augmented generation, you can mitigate and contain that a little bit. And the other topic is not necessarily, let's say, a technical one or the quality of responses that you get, but depending on the location, we are all in the EU, so constraints around data privacy, information security, if you talk about using APIs from providers of proprietary models and so on and so forth, so that can be quite difficult obstacles to overcome when you really want to implement Gen AI into your workflows.
And I also, if I can add on that, I also think it does not free you as much as some PowerPoint slides and clever consultants want to sell that to you. It does not free you from understanding your processes. And I have a very prominent example using the expressions node or column expressions node. I asked Gen AI, say, hey, I'm not a coder, write me the code for that. And it wrote a code that had the all excluding condition first. So I always got an empty table. Again, a learning for me, seeing, okay, I still need to know my process. I still need to understand what's happening there. And so it's not that I just press a button and then it's magically done. Unfortunately, still not the case.
But so you said that you can trust AI a bit like your junior colleague. So, but then you work in auditing, right? So it's quite, can I say, complicated, quite delicate topic. So how much can you trust AI really to do your work? For example, to find, I don't know, frauds or something that is not correct?
I think to have that trust in AI, you've got to, as you said before, understand how it works. It will give you an answer, whether it's right or wrong. And you've got to validate that answer. So with tools like Kai, for example, you know, it will come up with a workflow. But if you understand Knime, for example, you can say whether that workflow is right or not. It's that human, that I hate to use a technical term, but that human in the loop, in a sense, is absolutely what's key here.
And I think that especially depends also on in which area you're going to deploy AI. I mean, there are probably high-risk areas and low-risk areas, where in low-risk areas, you know, maybe an AI mistake is not as consequential as in high-risk areas. And I think that's where one needs to be quite sensitive to know when it's worthwhile to deploy it and just let it go, or when you really need to have that human in the loop to make sure that all I's are dotted and all T's are crossed.
And I think you also have, just like you said, and like Michael also said, like revisiting prompts, revisiting models, monitoring what it does. Does the outcome deteriorate over time? So I guess I would say probably kind of having a critical view on it. I once thought it is not the magic wand. It is sometimes a bit of an inspiration to how I can approach certain things that I probably would have taken a long time to come up with. But yeah, so you also need to really be sure, okay, what am I doing? And especially also in finance, to low risk versus high risk. One thing, for example, as easy as it might sound, we're definitely not doing is like sending, for example, any budgeting files or forecasting files to OpenAI's API interface, because, I mean, that's just something we don't want to have shared outside. And it's a process question to a certain extent also to define, and that's where the process knowledge comes in, to define what is low risk. I can trust it a bit more, and which is high risk, where I really have to be careful.
But that's when your local models that you were talking about before might help.
Yeah, exactly.
I see. Okay, so Michael talked about AI agents. So this is a bit the new word, the new big topic that is coming in the field of AI. And well, he already explained what an AI agent is. So yeah, I'm not going to ask that here. And then he had this proposal on how to build AI agents. You remember the last slide with the tiny little tools and then bigger and bigger, in the pyramid. So now, what is your take on that? What is your approach in building an AI agent? Would you like to have a big do-it-all agent, or do you prefer to have a smaller specialized agent? And what are the pros and cons? I start with Martin, because I know that he has already tried to build some of those.
Yeah, I think there's no way around in that case, going for a bottom-up approach, so starting with building smaller chunks, and as you add, let's say, more tools and more specialized agents, then at some stage add this orchestration agent on top, whose only job is to delegate to the right agent based on the user input. And especially in the finance area, I actually see a huge opportunity for agents that can use tools, because you mentioned that no one wants to send finance data to an OpenAI API because it's confidential. But if the OpenAI API just has to decide whether it needs to call the CRM tool or the ERP tool, and just has to provide an output like which financial year and which month or whatever, and then the rest is being done by just a SQL query, which the tool then executes, then you already have mitigated a fair bit of risk in that area.
Would you like to comment on that?
I think there's an argument when it comes to AI agents that it's just an evolution of RPA. And that's what I firmly believe. And I think the more audit in particular can get to use that, the more it will be ground changing for the profession. There's a lot of, if I think back to my career in internal auditing, people were saying 20 years ago, data analytics is going to be the next big thing. Today you go there, and for 90%, 80% of the audit functions out there, data analytics is still going to be the next big thing. We haven't moved on. So I'm less worried in a sense around how you build them. In for my position, it's more about just get on and build them.
And I find also that Knime as a platform enables users to kind of play around with it, because I think at least for me, one of the big advantages of Knime is that with my process expertise, again being more of a citizen developer, and marrying my process expertise with these tools makes it way easier than trying to figure out what JSON post I have to send to the API of whomever. So the visual interface enables that more for me, and I also think, exactly like you said, that there are some things where you probably have the public APIs on top and utilize just some basic connection workflows, tools workflows, as Michael called them, underneath, because although we hear it everywhere, probably not everything needs to be AI, I find use it strategically at the right places. Right?
So you said that not everything needs to be AI, so that was another question. After seeing the presentation this morning, did you get an idea of what you would like to develop next, for example, using AI agents? You're smiling.
I definitely have an idea what I want to develop next. Yeah. I mean, your tools are simple interfaces to all your, I guess, systems that you have access to. And in finance, there are a lot, like management reporting, typically is a key task in finance, where you have financial and non-financial systems, and you need to draw off all of them to then put together a management report. And that is something that I can see an agent potentially doing in the future. And especially what I like about doing that in Knime versus looking at Python frameworks like LangGraph or Crew AI is that what the agent does becomes much more observable, because as your agent decides, the way that I understand it at least, to call a certain tool, you could actually click into that tool and see exactly what the agent is executing. And again, that increases transparency and I guess therefore reduces risk again.
So the visual character of the Knime developed agents helps more than, okay.
I think for me, if you go in any finance function today, it goes back to my comment I made earlier, it's death by Excel. And so if you think about all those cutting and sticking episodes that are going on out there to do reconciliations, etc., the ability to be able to go into databases, pull that information out, be able to reconcile it, be able to do that semi-autonomously will help those organizations free up people to do more value-adding things and actually add value to their organizations instead of just being there and moaning about reconciliations being late, MI being late, etc. And that's where I see the real advantage for this. And it's not necessarily for the people sitting around this room, because you guys know Knime and you can understand it and use it. There are thousands of other finance functions out there that would really benefit from the capabilities we're talking about today.
I think that's also kind of a step into the future. It really shortens the path towards AI, right? Because if you approach, let's be very bold, approach programming through a low-code interface like Knime, probably your learning curve is way shorter than if you do it through a classical language. And I'm not discouraging any classical programming language or anything. One other use case that I was thinking of also in regards to these robotic agents. I also like the bottom-up approach because it is like this agile. I can develop the perfect agent just to find out nobody uses it. Well, how worthwhile is that? But what I also like is this idea that maybe at one point in time I have an agent that, for example, takes over a lot of these quality gate tasks, because I see, especially in finance, you are usually working towards specific dates, end of month, end of quarter, end of fiscal year. And you usually, especially if you're a publicly traded company, you have really a hard time limits, so you have to deliver. And right now I still see that it often turns out to be night shifts, weekend shifts, this kind of stuff. And I just imagine if I had an agent that constantly checks, instead of humans doing it, doing 12 iterations through the same spreadsheet file, having an agent that says, you might want to look into your forecast because there seems to be something off, or something is missing, or we are not reaching the, or whatever the message is. I guess, especially if you can set it up in a way that it works with your sensitive information with an internal LLM, I think that would be a great benefit, because that also helps like the key stakeholders to focus on actions instead of finding the errors. So yeah, that's probably one use case I would also see.
Well, some of the tools that were mentioned today, they had some actions, maybe. It might have some actions included.
Yeah.
So I think I would like to ask if you have some questions for them. I have 2 more questions, but before I finish my list of questions, then maybe we get some questions from the audience. I give you 5 minutes to prepare a question. I'll ask another question, but then one of us has to ask a question. Okay. Okay, so what would you expect then from Knime to provide you to begin to create more AI workflows and more AI agents?
I think getting my hands on what was shown today and hopefully will be demonstrated later today, that would be the first step. I mean, my immediate thought when I looked at that presentation that I noticed is that there were a lot of different input nodes for the call workflow service. Sometimes JSON, sometimes I think input row-based, sometimes the normal one. And my initial thought was, shouldn't there be maybe a standard in how you call an agent? So that it's always the same, you exactly know which ports have to go in, which ports come out of it, and in between, you can do whatever you want in implementing your tools. Like that's what I would love to see.
So a standard input-output for the service.
I think one of the great features about the Knime community is the community hub itself. So I think the ability to have, workflows that are ready to go, example workflows that you can all take away and I can take away and tweak and tailor to the organization. I think that's going to be invaluable.
Yeah, I would also be looking to increase the use of Kai. I already think it is a great tool. I think that it's especially helping newbies in Knime also a lot. So it's an AI feature, probably not focused on large language models, but on workflow creation. But I also, for example, in a lot of trainings, I get the question, okay, you know the nodes, but how do I know? And my new response to that is, yeah, well, use Kai, ask it. If you want to get rid of a column, ask Kai. So if you would further improve on that, I really like it. And yeah, I'm really curious to see what Knime has in store for again, integrating our own large language models that run like in a safe environment, probably through
So
the
more
business
control.
hub and so on. But really, I'm curious to see how this is configured.
Well, yeah, okay. Okay, so anybody with the question? Yeah. Yeah.
Apart from technical challenges and the legal aspects, what were the biggest challenges you faced when you started using AI?
I might just start here. I mean, what I noticed, especially at the beginning when I started experimenting a little bit more, especially with local models, is that one of the big challenges is once you make something work with model A and model B gets released, which according to all benchmarks is the new gold standard, then your application may back down because a prompt may just not deliver the same output with that new model than it did with the old one. And just adopting, I guess, to this type of reality where you think, well, they are both large language models. If I tell them the same thing, I would expect that they get the job done, but that you then always need to pretty much reinvent the wheel and learn to adopt your prompts to new models to make sure that you can then also use those enhanced capabilities without your applications breaking down.
I think for me, the challenges in adopting AI on technical, the cultural. And I think back to the experiences I've had over the last couple of years, there's been a resistance internally because it's a lack of understanding essentially, and there's a bit of a concern, and people don't really understand the risks. I think there's also the knock-on impact of using AI. So I think back to my time in professional services, it's going to be a huge change. AI is going to change the face of professional services because you're not paying for people anymore. You're not paying for time and materials. What you're paying for is a job to be done. And that job to be done will be done by an AI, by a robot. And that robot won't incur the same time. So the clients say, well, why do I have to pay for this? And that has a whole load of knock-on effects. As with any technology that is brought into society, the technology is the easy bit. It's getting it in place and working, get everybody on board with it and getting it, using it to its maximum potential, which is the real challenge.
Yeah, and that was also exactly like you said, my first challenge. I mean, a lot of us started probably, hey, just write me a fun poem for XYZ, and that is easy. But really, I feel a little bit that this buzzword of prompt engineering, I guess Michael cited this morning, it is also kind of development. So if I look at my prompts these days, no matter if I use Kai or if I use something in ChatGPT, are way different than my original prompts, and I provide constraints and context and who the audience is and all these kinds. So it was also really a way of learning how to create a prompt that works, I would say, more predictably. I don't want to say perfectly because I also feel it does not always deliver exactly the same, right? But more predictably and saying, okay, if I configure my prompt this way, it hopefully returns more or less the same result. And that was a big learning or big challenge for me in the beginning because I was expecting, as I said, I enter the same stuff, I get the same result. That was not the case.
I think that's one of the reasons why adopting AI has to be a very structured thing to be done within your organization. So many times I've met people that go, I don't trust it. I don't trust it because I typed something and it gave me the wrong answer. Well, we all know that actually, if you were to take 100 chances of giving me an answer, it's going to get it right the vast majority of those times, 99% plus. The problem is user error. You're not typing in the right thing. You're not typing in the right prompt. You've got to understand the model that you're working with to craft that right prompt. But to build that trust within your organizations, you've got to coach and help people understand that. Otherwise, you're going to come up against that bigger and bigger wall of resistance within your organization.
think it was Tosin on online on social media that she had this proposal about having guardian agent, so agent that control what the previous agent has done, produced, and check if it's actually correct, makes sense, reliable, and exactly due to the non-deterministic nature of the LLM. Something else to add? Okay, another question? Back there?
Over here.
Sorry. Back there too?
Here in this corner. So thanks to the panel for this awesome discussion. My question is regarding the AI agents. They are all the hype now, and everybody believes that they need one. How do you distinguish when it actually makes sense to create one? And the second part of the question is, do you track if they are accepted? Are they even used?
So to a certain extent, I guess maybe I would answer for us for the second part. I would assume that I get a kind of usage statistics if I run it, for example, through the Business Hub. So at least see, is it used, is it executed? I could see the jobs on there. I guess we had it in your talk as well, because some people just use Knime and you do not monitor it. Depends also a little bit on the feedback to the first part of the question. I personally think it's basically classical requirement engineering, because I mean, just someone says, oh, you know, robotic agents are the next hot thing. Let's break down the task. What do you want to solve? And probably it's a simple quote-unquote automation. Maybe it's a prediction that Knime can do out of the box without any LLM connection. So, I mean, that can be sometimes a bit political, because if it sounds like, hey, my boss told me we need to build a robotic agent, that's a different story. But I guess really like looking at the tasks ahead, breaking it down, what do you really want to do, and not just in one sentence, probably helps to find out what they need.
I also think that probably there is no straight answer to that question, where does it make sense. I think people will have to start experimenting. And my gut feeling is then when people start experimenting, what they will find is that potentially their data is what is not ready for tool use, rather than, because I really think that the models are there in terms of being able to extract what you want and generating a structured output that you can use to call a tool. But the question is, and if your tool is still, I guess, spreadsheet-based primarily, then that is probably not going to be very helpful initially.
I don't think I can add much to this apart from say, you know, one of the things I've learned in life is the simplest answer is often the best one. And so, you know, and we're in a world right now where machine learning is now AI. There's lots of different things that are now AI, but always remember that the simplest answer is the best one. Not least because it's probably got less chance of going wrong.
Thank you.
Yes, Peter Niemeyer, building on the previous question, I have a question on how AI agents, MCP, basically will get into the task in finance. So there are some bold statements out there from companies that say they want to replace CFOs. Which task do you see to be automized first, and then the strategic decisions perhaps later? What time frame? How do you see that?
Well, I'm not sure if it will replace CFOs, and it's not just because the CFO is my boss. But I see the role of a CEO. I mean, you mentioned the word strategic. I guess that's the agents can help with freeing up more time for strategic decisions instead of quote unquote running for spreadsheets. It will be a development, I guess. Looking at the last 2 years, seeing how fast this topic has evolved, I just said recently to my wife, for me that was another iPhone moment, because that was really something groundbreaking new for me. So it was really interesting to see. I would say that the role of the CFO, I'm pretty sure about that, will probably change to be even more data-driven. perfect world, kind of, they should already be very data-driven, but I guess that probably increases to a level that we could not imagine a year or two ago. Again, I doubt a bit if like really strategic finance functions will be completely replaced. I would rather say they will be enhanced or elevated, maybe, kind of.
I would have said the safest position in any organization is probably the CFO, because they've got access to the money. And so if there was any agent going to ever replace the CFO, I'm telling you, a CFO would not give that project any funding whatsoever. I think, though, speaking to most of the CFOs that I've spoken to, thinking back to the conversations I've had with most CFOs over the last couple of years, it's not been about, how do I interpret this? It's not been about, how do I go and buy this venture over there? What it's been is, I've got all these essentially bookkeepers who are struggling to do the basics every day because they're doing it in things like Excel and they're not getting it right and things are going wrong in all those manual processes. And that's what this is going to help with. And I don't see it being, there's loads of doom statistics out there about, in finance functions, about there being huge job cuts, and the role of the accountant and the role of the bookkeeper and the role of the payroll clerk is all going to change. Some of that is true, unfortunately. But I'd like to think that it's going to make that finance function much more strategic, and instead of firefighting, it's going to take that function to be actually at the front of the business, leading the charge, helping that business grow.
I just want to pick up on one part of your question, which mentioned MCP. I guess you referred to Model Context Protocol from Anthropic. I mean, that is obviously a not no-code, not low-code, but a full-code way to, I guess, write your own interfaces that run on your local machine. So I can see that, given that finance is quite a data-driven function, that companies have hopes to give their agents the right tools to draw off the vast amount of data efficiently, and maybe based on that decisions can be made. But I'm with you and also with you that it's not, I think, going to replace a CFO. I think the CFO role will become even less transactional and even more strategic, because a lot of these data crunching tasks, I mean, just to give you an example, what I have in mind, one of the tasks that I was always dreading when my boss says, look, you know, we did a budget 9 months ago, now we just did a reforecast, and 3 months ago we had another preview of the reforecast. Can you explain me the differences? You know, what is bridging that? Yeah, and that was a very tedious task, because you needed to dive into Excel spreadsheets and find out exactly which assumptions have changed between the different versions to build that bridge. And I think once the data is structured enough, then that is a question that agents may not have any trouble in answering very, very quickly.
I also think that that probably is a shift in how we interact with the data, right? So we could envision, for example, something that I talk to my data instead of doing a Power BI or Tableau or whatever kind of dashboard with like these huge tables still in them, is just, hey, chat, why is my forecast 10% below expectations? And I mean, that involves, again, trust in the response, of course, so it needs to be approved and everything, but I could envision that this is one of the ways how AI could enable finance roles to interact with their data rather than filtering and whatnot, or even going into any kinds of dashboards. Probably the human
interaction,
communicational approach. Yeah,
and that's a really good point for those of you like me who are internal auditors, who are a little bit one step away from the finance function. That's where we can really help, because we should be doing those data governance audits now to make sure, and those implementation reviews to make sure that the finance function can have trust in the data and the outputs of AI that they're using.
Okay, so we missed 2 minutes till the time that they gave us for this panel. So I think I don't want to go over because we are close to lunch, unless the Knime CFO has something to ask. Otherwise, I think we can close it here. So I would like to thank you, and I wanted to give you the little badge as certified trainers. You have
Thank
it already.
you.
I've already got mine, thank you.
So if you have done any L4 certification, then you can claim your data analyst, data engineer, data scientist certified trainer badge at the Knime community booth. Okay, and then with that, I think we can close it. I would like to thank you for your expertise and for the opinions, and I hope you all have enjoy your lunch.